I stood on the platform in Vermont, clutching my train ticket and a paper cup of coffee that had already gone lukewarm. The trees across the tracks were a riot of gold and red, just like I had imagined when I planned this trip. The 40th wedding anniversary trip, for my parents, paid for, organized, and timed around their favorite season. I gave the agent my ticket. He scanned it, his brow furrowed. "This one's already been checked in," he said. I blinked. "I'm sorry." He turned the scanner toward me like it would explain everything. "Checked in this morning. Passenger already boarded." "That's not possible," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, a knot started to form in my stomach. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my brother Brian. "Tiff really wanted to see the fall colors. You don't even like crowds. We figured it made sense." I stared at the message, then stared at the train as it pulled away without me. I didn't call, didn't reply. I just stood there holding coffee I no longer wanted, surrounded by the trip I had built for people who didn't think I needed to be there. Tiffany had my seat. Tiffany, Brian's girlfriend of 6 months, who once used my guest bathroom to film a TikTok with my toothbrush. And I was an afterthought, not even that. I was a placeholder they'd quietly erased. The worst part wasn't that they left. It was that no one even thought to tell me. I used to think being dependable was something to be proud of. Growing up, I was the one who cleaned up after dinner without being asked who got straight A's, while Brian scraped by on late homework and charm. When our dad Robert lost his job the year I turned 16, I picked up shifts at the diner and handed every dollar to my mom Carol without question. She called me her little rock, and I wore the title like a badge. Brian, on the other hand, was the baby, the one they always said just needed more time. He crashed the car twice before he turned 20 and never paid for either repair. But when he got a C in microeconomics, Mom cried tears of pride. "He's trying so hard," she said. When Brian got into community college, I covered his books. When he dropped out, I helped him find a job. When he lost it a month later, I co-signed his lease and made the payments when he didn't. He moved in and out of my guest room more times than I can count, always with some new excuse. Tiffany was just the latest version of his life on someone else's dime. I never complained out loud. I made good money as a systems analyst. I told myself I was helping. That's what good daughters do. Besides, if I didn't step up, who would Mom never asked me directly to foot the bills? She had a different way of getting there. "Your brother's doing his best, honey. It's hard out there for young people. You're lucky to have a stable career. Not everyone has your sense of responsibility." I don't think she ever thanked me. Not really. But she always made it clear she expected it. And when I gave it was never framed as a gift, it was just what I did. Who I was. Reliable, strong, capable. And over the years, it became easier to be that person than to ask why no one else was. I didn't plan the anniversary trip to prove anything. I planned it because they'd once told me they'd honeymooned near the Berkshires, because Mom lit up whenever fall rolled around, because Dad still kept the old Polaroid from that trip in his dresser drawer. I thought maybe, if I gave them something beautiful, they'd finally see me not just what I could offer. But looking back now, I realize they saw exactly what they always had. Not a daughter. A solution. It started as an idea on a yellow sticky note. "So Berkshire's October." I'd scribbled it in the margin of my work planner after Mom mentioned it over coffee, how she and Dad had honeymooned in a tiny inn near Lenox with creaky floors and maple syrup on the windowsill. That afternoon, I started researching fall foliage tours. Within a week, I had everything blocked out. Scenic Rail passes through New England, a 2-night stay in a historic inn with vineyard views, a private dinner reservation at the same restaurant they'd visited 40 years ago. I even upgraded their rooms to have a fireplace. Just like before I wrote on the itinerary card I planned to surprise them with. I didn't need anything fancy for myself. I booked a small room at a roadside motel and took coach class on the train. The whole trip came to just under $9,000. That included everything: transportation, meals, activities, even a bouquet of fresh asters and goldenrod for their anniversary dinner. I used PTO to make it fit between 2 major client deadlines and rearranged my calendar for the next 6 weeks so I wouldn't miss a beat at work. Brian wasn't part of the plan, not originally. Mom said he might be too busy with some freelance thing. which usually meant doing nothing in his apartment while Tiffany practiced TikTok dances in the background. I didn't press it. Truthfully, I'd imagined this as a quiet trip, a moment for them to breathe, for me to maybe not impress them, but remind them I was here, that I still cared. It wasn't about proving my worth. I'd stopped chasing that years ago, but part of me hoped maybe this would be the thing that stuck, a memory they'd talk about at Thanksgiving, a photo they'd frame and actually send me a copy of, a small crack in the wall between us. It was never about the train ride or the hotel. It was about the table I set, the effort I poured in, the hope I still stupidly carried. And somehow, it still wasn't enough to get a seat. A week before the trip, I got a text from Mom. Tiff said her fall content would look amazing up there. Brian thinks it'd be fun if we added them. Is that okay? There was no mention of where they'd stay, how they'd get there, or who would pay. Just the assumption that I'd make it work. I stared at the message for a while before replying. If the rooms can still be adjusted, I'll try. That was all I said. Not because I was upset yet, but because I knew how this game worked. Every ask came draped in pleasantries framed as spontaneous, and always, somehow, it became my responsibility to smooth it out. I checked the reservation site that night. The inn was nearly full. I managed to get another room nearby, small and overpriced. Still, I booked it. Then, I emailed the train company to confirm the seating. Our cabin could hold 4. Any more would require shifting to a different car. I asked them to hold our original reservation. I didn't hear back from Mom again. Not about logistics. Not about anything. The group chat went quiet. A few days later, I saw Tiffany post an Instagram story, a pair of brown leather boots, and a caption, "Can't wait for fall adventures." The boots were on my living room floor. She hadn't asked before taking the picture. Something in me tightened, but I let it go. Because that's what I did. Even as the unease crept in, I convinced myself it would be fine, that I was being sensitive, that they wouldn't just cut me out. They wouldn't. I stayed on the platform long after the train had disappeared around the bend. The sky was soft with morning mist, and the trees swayed in slow motion like they were unaware of the hollow ache blooming inside my chest. My suitcase sat beside me, untouched, pointless. No one called, no one texted again. Not Brian, not Mom, not even a generic sorry for the mix-up. I wasn't part of the mistake. I was the mistake. And Tiffany. She got the scenic view, the curated experience, the seat I held for months while building an itinerary they never asked for but happily accepted. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked to the cafe across from the station, ordered another coffee I didn't want, and sat by the window watching strangers board buses to places I hadn't planned for. I scrolled through social media. Brian had posted a photo, Mom and Dad smiling on the train platform, arms looped with Tiffany's. The caption read, "Family Fall Getaway. Finally making memories together. The word struck harder than I expected, like it excluded me on purpose, like they'd finally achieved a picture-perfect version of themselves, now that I was gone. I didn't comment. I didn't like the photo. I just locked my phone and stared at the tabletop, tracing the scratches in the wood like they could offer answers. They didn't forget me. They made a choice, and I needed to make one too. I didn't go home. Instead, I rented a car and drove north, no plan, no GPS, just a vague memory of a quiet town I'd once passed through on a solo work trip. It was called Brattleboro, small, tucked into the folds of Vermont, the kind of place where no one asked questions and the air smelled like pine. I found a roadside inn with vacancy and a fireplace, then checked in without unpacking. The room had a window that looked out onto a gravel path lined with sugar maples. I sat by it that evening with a blanket over my lap and a cup of chamomile I didn't finish. For 2 days, I didn't check my phone. I didn't reply to the few texts that trickled in, nothing from Mom, just a group message from Brian asking if I'd gotten mixed up on the train schedule. No apology, just a soft punchline with a shrug underneath. I left it on red. Instead, I walked. Through orchards shedding their last red leaves, through antique shops selling things no one really needed. I bought a postcard but didn't write anything on it. I thought about sending it to myself, then folded it into a book and forgot it was there. I let the quiet settle inside me like something earned. For the first time in years, I didn't have to explain my silence or hold space for someone else's mess. I didn't have to adjust my tone, downplay my hurt, or tell myself I was being dramatic. I was alone, and it didn't feel empty. It felt honest. The trip I'd planned was gone. The people I'd planned it for had made their choice. And now I was making mine. I got back to my apartment late Tuesday afternoon. The sky was low and gray, the kind of quiet overcast that made the whole street feel like it was holding its breath. I dropped my bag by the door and didn't bother unpacking. Out of habit, I opened Facebook. Mom had posted again 24 photos from the trip. She'd tagged Brian, Tiffany, and even the bed and breakfast. Not me. There was one image that stopped me, the dinner table I had reserved months ago, candles flickering, a bouquet of goldenrod and asters in the center. My centerpiece. My reservation. My handwriting still faintly visible on the place cards. Tiffany sat where I was supposed to be. The caption read, "Grateful for our children who made this anniversary so special." Couldn't have asked for a more loving weekend. I closed the app. The next morning I got an email from Mom's shared account with Dad's subject line photos from the trip. No message. Just the images attached in bulk, as if I were a distant cousin who'd missed a reunion. No, we missed you. No, where were you? Just evidence. Proof that the weekend happened. Without me. That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was the family they'd chosen to show up for. The next day, I drove to the house. My house. The one I bought 6 years ago with my name on every document and every bill. The one I'd let them live in rent-free. They weren't home. I walked through each room slowly. The guest towels I bought were faded. The kitchen smelled like someone else's cooking. Tiffany's raincoat hung on the banister. I stood in the dining room, the same room Mom had once called hers during a birthday toast. And I realized something so simple it felt like a revelation. They weren't renters, they were takers. And I was done offering. The lease adjustment notice went out the next morning. I printed 2 copies, one for the kitchen counter, the other mailed certified. It was clean, professional. No sharp language, just numbers and dates. The rent now at market rate. Utilities no longer bundled. Guest privileges revoked unless approved in writing. There was a deadline the 1st of the month. I didn't include a note, didn't owe them one. That afternoon I got a call from Mom. She didn't start with hello. "Lauren, what is this? Are you seriously charging us rent?" There was no trace of confusion in her voice, only offense. "This is cruel," she continued. "We're your parents." I waited a beat before answering. "Then maybe you should have treated me like your daughter." She scoffed. "So this is about that trip." I said nothing. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she added, softening. "It just happened." I could hear her walking through the living room, the creak of the old floorboard near the front window. "Your father's upset," she said. But Robert hadn't called, hadn't texted. I wasn't sure if he even knew or cared. "You could have just talked to us," she said. "I could have. I chose this instead." "You've got until the 1st, I said gently. "After that, it becomes legal. You're not serious." "I am." She hung up. For a long time, I stood at the kitchen sink and stared at the faucet. Not angry, not proud, just steady. The house didn't feel like mine anymore, but it wasn't theirs either. It had been a gift. Now it was a boundary. The email came 3 days later from a local law office I didn't recognize. Subject: intent to dispute ownership. Inside was a scanned letter my parents through counsel were asserting long-term financial contributions and shared occupancy, claiming partial rights to the house. No dollar amounts, no documents. Just vague language meant to sound formal and intimidating. I forwarded it to my attorney. He called within the hour. "There's nothing here," he said. "They've got no legal standing. This is noise." But it wasn't just noise. It was confirmation. They weren't sorry. They were retaliating. Brian showed up the next evening. He looked like he hadn't slept. His usual careless swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet, unfocused guilt. "Tiff left," he said, standing awkwardly on the front step. "Said she didn't sign up for all this family crap. He didn't ask to come in. Just stood there like maybe the door would open out of habit. I don't have anywhere to go," he added. "You know that, right? I did. But I also knew what came next if I let him in." "I'm not your safety net," I said. He looked down at his shoes, then back up, eyes glassy but dry. "I didn't mean to hurt you, but he didn't say sorry." "Not really." And I didn't say anything at all. Dad never called. Not after the rent notice. Not after the legal letter. Not even when Brian showed up with nowhere to go. He didn't yell, didn't text, didn't ask me why. But that wasn't new. Growing up, his silence had always been the backdrop. When Mom pushed too hard, when Brian acted out, when I broke down under the weight of being the steady one, he'd just sip his coffee and disappear into the next room. His neutrality had a softness to it that made it feel harmless, almost gentle. But now I saw it clearly. It wasn't gentleness. It was consent in silence. He had let it all happen, every ask, every assumption, every time they took from me without thanks or pause. And now he was letting this happen too. The day I dropped off their certified notice, he was out front watering the bushes. He looked up as I walked past. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. It was the only thing he'd said to me in weeks. I looked him in the eye and answered just as quietly. "I do." He didn't respond, just turned the hose back to the rose bush as if he hadn't heard anything at all. 3 weeks later, I moved into a small loft across the river. Exposed brick-high windows, just enough space for me and my quiet. No footsteps overhead, no doors slamming, no voices asking for something. I bought a second-hand couch, a real tea kettle, and a lamp I actually liked. The air smelled like dust and new paint. I opened the windows anyway. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for my phone to buzz. No group chats asking for grocery money. No guilt-soaked check-ins disguised as concern. Just mornings with my own schedule and evenings that belonged only to me. Brian hasn't texted since that last night on the porch. Tiffany deleted our photos, unfollowed the whole family. And my parents. Well, they've gone quiet too. Mom tried one last time, a message with no greeting. "We miss who you used to be." I replied, "You miss the version of me who never said no." She's gone. There was no answer after that. Sometimes I walk past the park near the train station and sit on the same bench where I read Brian's message the day they left me behind. I don't replay it anymore. I just sit. Because that's what peace feels like. Not a celebration, not revenge, just the absence of noise. I used to think saying no would make me heartless. Now I know it made me whole. Last week I booked a train to Maine. No itinerary, no group chat, no anniversary dinner to coordinate. Just me, a window seat, in a quiet town with a bookstore I've always wanted to visit. I didn't ask anyone's permission, didn't check anyone's calendar, didn't offer to bring souvenirs. I packed light, one bag, a notebook, and a sweater that still smells faintly of cedar. At the station I paused before boarding just for a second and let myself remember that morning in Vermont. The sting was gone. All that remained was clarity. I am not their fixer, not their fallback, not their foundation. I am not their plan B. I am my own beginning. There's a sticky note on my new bathroom mirror. Just 5 words I wrote after the move when the silence was still raw. I owe myself the most. And every morning I read it like a promise. Some stories aren't told for sympathy. They're told for recognition. If this one made something inside you stir, then maybe it wasn't just a story. Was there a moment you finally said enough? Tell us your words might be the light someone else needs. Like if you've ever felt invisible in the family you built. Subscribe to hear stories that don't just end, they free you.